Vancouver's skyline rises like a promise between the mountains and the sea. Glass towers catch the sunlight. Snow-capped peaks frame the horizon. The Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly beside the city, reflecting an image of prosperity, peace, and possibility. For millions around the world, Vancouver represents a dream: clean, modern, wealthy, and safe. It regularly ranks among the most livable cities on Earth. But for those who live here, that image hides a far more complicated truth. Behind the postcard beauty lies a city defined by contradiction. A city where luxury condos overlook tent encampments. Where global capital flows freely, but working people struggle to stay. Where innovation thrives, yet inequality deepens. Vancouver is not just a success story, it is a warning. This is the story of how Vancouver became what it is today, a city shaped by history, economics, policy choices, and human consequences. From resource outpost to global city. Vancouver's story begins not with glass towers, but with forests, water, and indigenous stewardship. Long before European settlement, these lands were home to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. They lived, fished, traded, and governed here for thousands of years. Vancouver still sits on unceded Indigenous land, a fact that shapes every conversation about land, housing, and power today. The modern city emerged rapidly in the late 19th century as a colonial port town. Timber, fishing, railroads, and shipping fueled early growth. Vancouver burned to the ground in the Great Fire of 1886 and rebuilt almost immediately, a symbol of resilience that still defines its identity. For decades, the economy revolved around natural resources and the port. The city was rough-edged, working-class, and outward-facing. But over the last half-century, Vancouver transformed. Resource dependence declined, and a service-driven, knowledge-based economy took its place. Today, Metro Vancouver generates more than $149 billion in GDP. Services now account for over 75% of British Columbia's economy, with real estate, professional services, finance, education, technology, film, and tourism leading the way. The Port of Vancouver became Canada's largest port, connecting the country to Asia-Pacific markets. Film and television production turned the city into Hollywood North, with dozens of movies and television series filmed every year. Major universities like the University of British Columbia and Simon Fraser University attracted international students and research funding. Vancouver's tech sector grew rapidly, becoming one of North America's fastest expanding innovation hubs. On paper, Vancouver succeeded. It diversified its economy, attracted global investment, and positioned itself as a modern, forward-looking city. But success came with a cost. An economy that leaves people behind. Economic growth did not translate equally into prosperity for all. While high-paying jobs emerged in technology, finance, and real estate, wages for many workers stagnated. At the same time, the cost of living, especially housing, exploded. Real estate became the single most powerful force in Vancouver's economy. Homes were no longer just places to live. They became financial instruments. Investment vehicles. Stores of global wealth. Between 2015 and 2025, average home prices nearly doubled. Detached houses approached $2 million. Condos rose beyond the reach of middle-income earners. Rent followed the same trajectory, becoming the highest in Canada. Entire industries grew around housing: real estate agents, developers, mortgage brokers, lawyers, construction firms, while fewer homes were built for people who actually needed them. Vancouver's economy became increasingly dependent on housing prices staying high. This created perverse incentives. Policies that protect property values often harm affordability. The city found itself trapped between two visions of housing. One treats housing as a human right. The other treats it as an investment. Vancouver largely chose the latter. The housing crisis that defined a city. Vancouver's housing crisis did not appear overnight. It was decades in the making. Geography played a role: mountains, water, and protected farmland limit outward expansion. But policy mattered more. For most of the city's history, zoning laws preserved vast areas for single-family homes. Density was concentrated downtown, while most neighborhoods remained low-rise. This restricted supply while demand soared. Immigration increased. Population grew. Global investors sought stable real estate. The result was inevitable: prices skyrocketed. Foreign buyer taxes, empty homes taxes, and speculation taxes were introduced, but none fundamentally solved the problem. Purpose-built rental housing lagged for decades because it was less profitable than condos. Inclusionary zoning produced only modest numbers of affordable units. Even recent, missing middle, reforms allowing multiplexes across the city will add supply slowly, far too slowly to meet demand. The consequences became visible everywhere. Families crowded into small apartments. Students shared bedrooms. Seniors faced eviction. Young professionals left the city entirely. Vancouver became a city where full-time work no longer guaranteed shelter. And for some, even that was too much. Homelessness in the shadow of wealth. Homelessness is the most visible symptom of Vancouver's housing failure. Tent encampments grew in parks, sidewalks, and under bridges. The number of unhoused people increased dramatically over the past 2 decades, with sharp rises after economic downturns and housing spikes. Indigenous people are disproportionately affected. Although they represent a small percentage of Vancouver's population, they make up a large share of the homeless population. This is not coincidence, it is the result of colonial displacement, residential schools, systemic racism, and intergenerational trauma. Homelessness is often framed as an individual failure. In reality, it is systemic. When housing costs exceed incomes, when mental health care is unavailable, when addiction treatment is inaccessible, people fall through the cracks. Vancouver's response has often focused on managing visibility rather than solving root causes: clearing encampments, installing hostile architecture, moving people along. Real solutions require housing, treatment, support, and time. They require political will. And they require confronting uncomfortable truths. The opioid crisis, a public health disaster. Nowhere are those truths more visible than in Vancouver's downtown east side. This neighborhood has long been a place of concentrated poverty, addiction, and marginalization. It is also a community of resilience, activism, and survival. The opioid crisis turned this struggle into a humanitarian emergency. Fentanyl and synthetic opioids flooded the drug supply, making overdose more likely and more deadly. British Columbia declared a public health emergency in 2016. Thousands have died since. Vancouver became a global focal point for harm reduction. It opened North America's first supervised injection site. It expanded naloxone access. It piloted safe supply programs. Evidence shows these interventions save lives, but they remain politically controversial. Some see harm reduction as enabling drug use. Others see it as the only humane response. The reality is stark: without intervention, people die. Addiction is not solved by punishment. Dead people cannot recover. The crisis intersects with homelessness, mental illness, trauma, and poverty. It is not a single problem, it is a web. And Indigenous people remain disproportionately affected, reflecting deeper historical wounds that policy alone cannot heal. Unceded land and unfinished reconciliation. Vancouver's crisis cannot be understood without acknowledging where the city stands, on unceded Indigenous territory. The Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations never surrendered this land. Colonization imposed borders, laws, and systems that displaced Indigenous communities while enriching settlers. Residential schools, forced assimilation, and cultural erasure left scars that persist today. Urban Indigenous populations face higher rates of poverty, homelessness, and addiction, not because of culture, but because of trauma imposed by policy. In recent years, Vancouver has taken steps toward reconciliation. Land acknowledgements. Indigenous-led housing projects. Cultural recognition. But reconciliation is not symbolic, it is structural. It requires sharing power over land, housing, and decision-making. True reconciliation challenges the foundations of how Vancouver was built and who it was built for. Urban planning, transit, and the shape of the city. Vancouver's physical form reflects its values and contradictions. Dense downtown towers coexist with vast low-density neighborhoods. Transit investments like SkyTran helped reduce car dependence, but many areas remain underserved. The region is fragmented across municipalities, Vancouver, Surrey, Burnaby, Richmond, each with its own priorities. Housing shortages in one area spill into another. Growth pressures intensify regional tensions. Efforts to densify, expand transit, and build sustainable infrastructure face resistance from homeowners protecting property values. Yet cities cannot remain frozen. When cities cannot grow outward, they must grow upward. Vancouver stands at a turning point. Its planning decisions over the next decade will shape affordability, climate resilience, and social cohesion for generations. Climate change comes for the coast. Climate change is no longer theoretical in Vancouver. Heat domes, wildfires, smoke-filled skies, and rising seas have become part of daily life. The 2021 heat dome killed hundreds. Wildfire smoke now regularly blankets the city. Sea level rise threatens waterfront neighborhoods. Vancouver has ambitious climate goals, carbon neutrality, green buildings, transit expansion. But adaptation is expensive and complex. Protecting shorelines, retrofitting buildings, and safeguarding vulnerable populations will require massive investment. Climate change amplifies inequality. Those with resources adapt. Those without suffer. Culture, diversity, and a city still becoming. Vancouver is one of the most diverse cities in North America. Immigration shaped its food, language, arts, and identity. The city feels global in a way few others do. Yet diversity does not automatically mean inclusion. Racism persists. Economic segregation grows. Cultural richness coexists with structural inequality. Vancouver's culture is still forming. It is young. Transient. Searching for roots. The natural environment provides a shared identity, but belonging requires more than beauty. Politics, power, and the future. Governance in Vancouver is fragmented across municipal, provincial, and federal levels. Each controls different levers. Coordination is difficult. Accountability is diffuse. Housing, healthcare, policing, and social services intersect but are funded separately. Jurisdictional disputes slow action. Political courage is often constrained by electoral fear. Yet cities are shaped by choices. Vancouver's past shows how quickly transformation can occur. Its future is not predetermined. A city at a crossroads. Vancouver is not just a place. It is a decision-making machine. Every zoning law, every tax policy, every funding choice shapes who belongs and who is pushed aside. This city can become a place where housing is a right, not a commodity. Where reconciliation is real, not rhetorical. Where climate action protects the vulnerable. Where prosperity is shared. Or it can continue on its current path. Beautiful, wealthy, and increasingly exclusive. Vancouver's story is still being written. Its skyline reflects more than sunlight, it reflects values. The question is not what Vancouver looks like, but who it is for. And that answer depends on the choices made now.